We have already made some remarks about this popular question of what comes of such distinctions. Let us now simply reflect on our enterprise. We ask, why are there beings at all instead of nothing? And in this question we apparently restrict ourselves only to beings and avoid empty brooding about being. Okay? So we don't want to emptily grumble and be nihilistic about it, but we want to meditate and self-reflect upon it. Got it. But what are we really asking? Why beings as such are? We are asking about the ground for the fact that beings are, and are what they are, and that there is nothing instead. We are asking at bottom about being, but how? We are asking about the being of beings. We are interrogating beings in regard to their being. I'm going to annotate that real quick. But if we persevere in questioning, we are really already asking ahead about being in regard to its ground, even if this question does not develop and it remains undecided whether being itself is not already in itself a ground and ground enough. If we pose this question about being as the first question in rank, then should we do so without knowing how it stands with being and how being stands in its distinction from beings? How are we even supposed to inquire into the ground for the being of beings, let alone be able to find it out, if we have not adequately conceived, understood, and grasped being itself? This enterprise would be just as hopeless as if someone wanted to explain the cause and ground of a fire and declared that he need not bother with the course of the fire or the investigation of its scene. So it turns out that the question, why are there beings at all instead of nothing, forces us to the prior question, how does it stand with being? We are now asking about something that we hardly grasp. Something that is now no more than the sound of a word for us, and that puts us in danger of falling victim to mere word idolatry. Ooh, Heidegger, saucy. In our further questioning, so it is all the more necessary for us to get clear from the outset of how it stands for us at present with being and with our understanding of being. Here it is important above all to impress on our experience again and again the fact that we are not able to lay hold of the being of beings, directly and expressly, neither by way of beings, nor in beings, nor anywhere else at all. A few examples should help. Should they, Heidegger? Over there, on the other side of the street, stands the high school building, a being. Okay, where you going with this, brother? We can scour every side of the building from the outside, roam through the inside of the basement to the attic, and note everything that can be found there. Hallways, stairs, classrooms, and their furnishings. Everywhere we find beings. And in a very definite order. Where now is the being of this high school? It is, after all, the building is. The being of this being belongs to it if anything does, and nevertheless we do not find this being within the being. The being of this school. So why is the school a being and it exists in and of itself regardless of the objects contained within it? Gotcha. Moreover, being does not consist in our observing beings. Let's repeat that again. Being does not consist in our observing beings. The building stands there even if we do not observe it. Bam! When you get Heidegger. We can come across it only because it already is. In addition, the being of the building does not at all seem to be identical for everybody. Wait a minute. So it's identical for everybody, so is he telling me it's relative? Is he telling me that being is relative, subjective? For us, as observers or passerby, it is not what it is for the students who sit inside, not just because they see it only from the inside, but because for them this building really is what it is and how it is. One can as it were, smell the being of such buildings. Okay, Heidegger, you walking around smelling buildings? What's going on, family? You better get somewhere with this. The scent provides the being of this being much more directly and truly than it could be communicated by a description or inspection. Okay, with a building, I would not use the scent as just the identifier for the being within that being, because what's inside the school building is a bunch of farts. You got a bunch of people who didn't wear deodorant. You got the janitor putting bleach on the floor. Is he talking about the scent contained within or on the outside of the brick? I mean, you have the lawn. I mean, let's see where he takes us, because I could agree if they were talking about like a piece of brie cheese. Okay, I get that, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about an artificial building. So let's see where he takes us. On the other hand, the subsistence of the building does not depend on this scent that is hovering around somewhere. How does it stand with being? Can we see being? You just told us we could, Heidegger. Heidegger, what are you talking about? We see beings, the chalk here, but do we see beings as we see color and light and dark? Or do we hear, smell, taste, or touch being? Well, you just told us that we smell the being of the school, Heidegger. I can see the school. I can smell the school. So where you going with me, fam? We hear the motorcycle roaring along the street. We hear the grouse flying off through the mountain forest in its gilding flight. Yet really we are only hearing the noise of the motors rattling. The noise that the grouse causes. Furthermore, it is hard and unusual for us to describe the pure noise, because it is precisely not what we generally hear. We always hear more than the mere noise. We hear the flying bird, although strictly speaking, we have to say a grouse is nothing we can hear. It is not a tone that can be registered on a scale. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, the bird, I can register the bird's sound through its vocal cords, or the flapping of its wings, or the scratching of its feet. I then would have to decide which attributes on the animal would identify its being. If I say that the being is attached to the heart is what pumps in and flows the blood, which leads to the brain, which causes the bird to caw and flap its wings. That is a signaler of being. That's what I would say. And I would register those sounds on a scale and say that was its being, and that's how I would detect it, because it would have its own unique signature if I were to record it. But Heidegger also might be saying that because the bird does not have its own natural tone, like like the musical ABCD whatever, that therefore is not something that can be registered or a tag to the bird. Okay, I can see that, but let's see. And so it is with the other senses. We touch velvet, silk. We see them without further ado as such and such a being. And the one is in being distinctly from the other. Where does being lie, and in what does it consist? That is what I just said, Heidegger. You need to tell me. That's why I'm reading his book, right? Yet we must look around us still more thoroughly and contemplate the narrow and wider sphere within which we dwell. Daily and hourly, knowing and unknowing, a sphere that can stand, constantly shifts its boundaries and suddenly is broken through. A heavy thunderstorm gathering in the mountains is or it makes no difference here. Was in the night. What does it being consist in? Well, a heavy thunderstorm would consist in the electricity that is pulsating throughout. So that would be the being. Those atoms clashing. The magnetism that is flowing through the storm is what I would call its being. It's force. That's what I would call its being. A distant mountain range under a vast sky, such as a thing, is what does it being consistent? When and to whom does it reveal itself? A distant mountain range, okay? So, what does the mountain range being consistent? Its physical structure. Orogeny occurs when two tectonic plates, I believe, push together and create a mountain range. So the top part of the mountain, its actual physicality, that's where I would down as being. And when does it show me? When does it reveal it? Is when I come across it. When my eyes see the mountain, filter it, I see the mountain's being. And to whom does it reveal? I'd say whoever walks across it. But whoever walks across it and wants to notice it. If you are a self-aware person, people on a hike are going to notice the mountains being far more than someone maybe who's listening to their iPod and just going on a commute. That's what I'd say. To the... Damn, oh, it's so good. Oh, look at this. To the hiker who enjoys the landscape, or to the peasant who makes his daily living from it and in it. I didn't even read ahead and I was already on the right track. Dang, I love philosophy. Or to the meteorologist who has just to give a weather report. The meteorologist who has to give a weather report. Who among them lays hold of being? Okay, so let's go with his example. He has a hiker, a peasant who works it, and the meteorologist who has to give a weather report. I would say first in hierarchy, I'd say the hiker for sure understands the being, the peasant second, meteorologist last, because the meteorologist is not an erogenist, and the meteorologist might just be recognizing there is a structure there and how it's going to, where some clouds are going to condense on the top of the mountain. So I'd say they'd be the last one to recognize the being of the mountain. That's what I'd say. You can totally jump in here, family. So, okay. Or do these people only lay hold of a particular aspect of the mountain range under the vast sky, not the mountain range itself as it is, not what its real being consists in? Who can lay hold of this, or is it nonsensical against the sense of being in the first place? To ask about what is in itself being those aspects, does being lie in the aspects? Does being lie in the aspects? Or does it lie behind the aspects? Can be both. Can literally be both. Now, let's forget about the mountain for a second. Let me just say, or the TV. The TV on the inside has the cables, and the screen. The screen is on the outside. We don't perceive what's on the inside. But if I take off the screen and perceive the wires, I wouldn't be able to see what the wires are going to do without the screen, because the screen and the wires are inherently connected. With a mountain range, the inside of the rock structure, right? These two plates coming together, there's the energy there, but the physicality of the range is its being, because every mountain range is unique. Whether it is the Rocky Mountains, whether it is the Himalayan mountains, they are all unique and in their being. They have their own personality, their own attributes, but those attributes add to the dynamicness of the being of the mountain. That is what I'd say. So I would argue that it's both. So, okay, I'm going to leave this part off here because he finishes his thought, and then we'll go on to discuss his other stuff.